On Faces of Five, I speak with people about their 5-MeO DMT experiences working with me. Learn more at chadcharles.net. Hi, Andria.
Hello.
Hi. We meet again.
We do.
As we have on numerous occasions over the years. We first saw each other, met, and had your first session in 2021.
Oh, wow. That long ago. Wow.
Yeah. And I want to go over your sessions that you've had and learn a little bit about them. But first, maybe just a little intro for those listening and viewing. Prior to coming to be with 5-MeO DMT, what other substance assisted events had you had in your life? Any guided work, any ceremonial work, or was this kind of the first time for you?
This was the first time for me. I have dabbled recreationally with things, but nothing guided. And I had it in mind that this was something I wanted to do for a very long time. And the situation never really presented itself. And then you were introduced to me by a friend of mine, and it felt like the right time.
So you had a
great substance. So
and it felt like, how did you know that? How did you know it was the right substance?
It's hard to tell when I think back on me and the decisions that I've made a little more intuitively. It's just a bit of a pull that I get. And then I was reading some information online, looking at the information you provide and other information that was out there. And yeah, the best way for me to describe it is really just kind of a pull towards this being what was probably the best fit for me at that time. And looking back, I think it was.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of a fit, even though this might have been a first guided session with a psychedelic and you chose 5, you are no stranger to being guided, and you're a guide yourself. You've been a therapist for quite a long time. Maybe remind me actually,
Sure.
what kind of a therapist are you? How would you describe your praxis and your methodologies?
Wow. Okay. I've been practicing since 1993, so it has been a long time. Again, a very kind of guided process when I look back on it in hindsight that took me to becoming immersed with EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and processing, which you may already know about. So that's the basis that I work from. And one of the things I like about it is it gives folks the opportunity to work from a place of bypassing the mind, but not ignoring what the mind has to offer in therapy, but encompasses the various kinds of information that we can get about our experience through the body, somatics and emotion and the mind and other things as well. From there, I was guided into working very somatically with folks. So I did training in that area. So I kind of combine the both now. As I was doing all my training in these areas, of course, I was spending time with this myself and building my relationship with my own body and mind. And I just felt that there were some stuck pieces in what I was working through myself that I didn't think I was going to get through. And didn't realize I'm deviating from your question. I'll come back to it in a sec. But I just felt like I needed some additional support with that was a little more, would push me a bit or kind of help me with the defenses that I have or had. Anyway, coming back to the therapy, the way I work with people is kind of helping them work with the defenses that are coming up for them through these different modalities, somatics and the EMDR. For the most part, a little bit of psychodynamic work as well.
Right. And you've been doing this a long time. And I guess what I infer from that is that your practice and your approach doesn't rely on or depend on cognitive processing.
It doesn't depend on it. It's just a piece of the puzzle, so to speak.
Right.
I do believe strongly in the belief system and the cognitions being the source of our suffering, one of the sources of our suffering. And so it's important to pay attention to it and where it comes from and how we can work with that on maybe a more mental, emotional, somatic perspective. So the cognitions do come into play. I just don't focus on that's the way we change things. Gives us
Right.
the information.
And so there's other ways that we can heal.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt, I remember thinking this when we first had our intake in 2021, that given the way that you approach your work, that you could understand, for lack of a better word,
Sure, that's
um,
okay. Yeah.
that there's something energetic that also happens that
Yeah.
isn't so much filtered through this, and
Yes.
maybe even is accessed because this isn't there in
Yes.
certain methodologies, your
Yeah.
EMDR, for example.
Yeah.
And so here you come into a session with 5-MeO DMT that in somehow is releasing or dissolving those filters, but it has a different portal or a different entryway.
Yeah.
Uh, I know it was a long time ago, right? 2021, but would you be able to kind of run us through a little play by play of that first session?
What I can remember of it, I mean, what's most vivid about my first session with you is the physicality of it. My experiences were quite physical. And so it felt like a lot of physical release. And what stood out for me the most was this really interesting experience of being very deeply in an observing capacity.
Observing,
Being,
like from a distance somehow of
well,
yourself?
observing from within, actually.
Hmm.
So almost like a real disconnect from my body, really disidentifying with my body, I guess, and really seeing this experience from a very separate perspective, but not like a dissociated perspective, like you said, maybe of looking down, but being within it and seeing it happening, which I found pretty fascinating. And it felt a lot like, yeah, it felt like a real purging of energy. I don't even know if I really ever knew what the energy being purged was connected to, but it felt important to release. Yeah, that's what I remember about that session. That's what stands out the most.
We have had many calls over the
Mhm.
years, and we've spoken really exactly about
Yeah.
that. About,
Yeah.
like, okay, so there's something felt. There's a
Mhm.
sense of, like you're calling it, release. There's a sense
Mhm.
of something moving. There's a
Mhm.
physicality to it, like I kind of call it a body load or a
Yeah, yeah,
body
yeah,
charge. And yet it's not exactly sensational all the time. There was elements of that being,
yeah.
localized in your body, I remember, but
Mm.
something is energetically felt,
Mhm.
and yet you don't exactly know what it was.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I guess my question to you is that, was that, has that been helpful?
It has. This is when it gets a little hard to put into words. It has helped me, and this, I mean, I guess eventually, I'm assuming we'll talk about that in my next session with you, but in kind of in combination with my next session with you, the experience has helped me to more consciously take that observing role. Maybe not to the level of disconnection that I did in session, but to be able to still be able to see disturbance for what it is, whether it's physical, mental, emotional. It just took that to a different level. I was doing some of that already because I have a spiritual practice that's very important to me as well. But this just took that to a different level. Like I felt like I've come to understand how that's important. It's not the end goal. There's more, of course, but how just that process of taking a step back and not grasping and attaching to my experience, whatever's going on in my life, good or challenging, with too much tenacity.
The
Mhm.
words come up of, like, the dispassionate witness,
Mm,
some sort of equanimity,
yes. Yeah.
right?
Great word. Yeah. Yeah.
Or, yeah, that detachment. You're there, but
Mhm.
not. enmeshed or entangled with it, right?
That's right.
There's a different kind of proximity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. That really, yeah, that's the perfect word. That's what it felt like in this first session, that I was able to be with the release of whatever was being released with complete equanimity. There was no distress around it. There was even a bit of curiosity, if I remember right. But no, this is uncomfortable. This is bad. There was none of that. It was just, oh, this is what's happening. Isn't that interesting? And I think it's important.
Would you say that you mentioned your own spiritual practices. Would you say that that really supported you in and around your sessions, or did it challenge your spiritual practices? How do you see the fit? And maybe tell us if you're comfortable of what your practices are.
Well, I meditate regularly. I connect with spiritual teachings that resonate with me. I connect with the beauty of nature. I have learned how to bring these experiences, which are very much somatic, felt sense experiences, into my work with
Hmm.
people, which
Hmm.
has been really lovely to hold space for others in a kind of a caring, loving, compassionate way. For me, I really see the intertwining of spiritual growth and the growth of human being evolution. So it kind of fits with what we were just talking about, this idea of bringing equanimity to challenges in life. That to me is a very spiritual practice.
Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
unpacking that a little bit. I had a little thought. Yes. I guess I wanted to bring another perspective, or just kind of zoom out. Like when you're talking about that first session, and we're kind of directly and conceptually a little bit talking about that distance, that neutrality. It's from within, not necessarily without, hard to describe. And yet, correct me if I'm wrong, in my memory, that first session, there was a lot of intensity in that
Mhm.
first session.
Mhm.
So it's remarkable to me for you to describe that inner posture,
Mm.
despite the physicality, despite the felt intensity of
Mhm.
of an experience. What do you think that intensity, and maybe this is what you don't know, or maybe where does that intensity come from?
My guess would be, and again, this is mostly based on my own work with the people that I work with, is that intensity is about the releasing of blocked energy. And I don't know if that, again, is necessarily true, but it makes sense to me. I believe experiences in life get stuck in our nervous system all the time. And so they just build and build and build. And the conscious mind isn't really that great at getting rid of that. It does a lot of great things, but getting rid of blocked energy is not a great job for that part of us. So that's what my experience in that first session felt like. It's just
Hmm.
kind of, ah.
Beautifully said. Yeah. I'm going to extend the picture a little bit more. After that session, you still experienced intensity for days after, if
Yeah.
I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
What
especially
kind
the
of
second session. But probably with both. The first session, I remember again more physical release. So I would get, you have a term for it, and I've forgotten what it is. Um,
reactivations, we call them.
that's right. That's right. Yes. So I would get those physical reactivations that felt similar to what I had in session with you, but on a much lighter scale or a much lower scale. So yeah, so it was continuing to be released, I'm assuming, afterwards. Yeah.
Years after, in hindsight, do you feel confident in saying that there's this something continued to be released? Like, how do you know? Do you feel something absent
Mm.
afterwards,
Well, that's
or is something gone? Is it like a sense of lightness, or just more detachment to it? Or
I think the lightness came later. So the experiences would happen. They eventually gradually lessened and lessened. Um, and it did feel like, if again, if I'm remembering right, and it does make sense that this would happen, there would be more of a lightness in my body following that. I can kind of feel my mind trying to figure out, well, what was being released, and so why would the light, all that crap. But it just, it just felt different.
It
Yeah.
felt different and
Yeah.
felt obviously positive enough. I'll just create an umbrella word, positive, for you then to come into a second session some years
Mhm.
later.
Yes. Yeah.
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 Uh-huh. So why did you come back?
Um, Again, it's just a very intuitive pull. And I don't know, this is my kind of flaky side coming out, but I received the email that you were going to be in town. You had one spot left. It showed up on a day that the one day I was available during the week. I knew I was still kind of pulled to another session with you anyway. And so it again felt like that was the right time. And I wanted to see if the second session would feel like the first session. I felt like there was more to work with, let's put it that way. And I wanted to see if it would show itself the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we're all ears. Did it show itself the same way? What was that second session for you?
It was totally different, which was so interesting. I felt oh gosh, it was so interesting. So with the 4 different inhales that I experienced, they were all different. It started from very intense and what felt very heavy to a progression right through to the 4th, which felt like a rebirth into the most loving, peaceful, beautiful, expansive state I can imagine. And I just remember and I come back to this feeling a lot. This is one of the benefits I definitely got out of that session, is the kind of the remembering of that feeling of lying on my side, surrounded by this brightness and very loving energy, which was beautiful. Because I don't know if you remember this, when I was in the middle of it, I wasn't sure I wanted to continue. The intensity was so high, and you encouraged me to, and I'm grateful that you did, because whatever was moving through definitely moved through and
Yes, I
left it.
remember
Yeah.
somewhere in there, I don't remember which round, but you
Mm-hmm.
had this experience of the void.
Mm-hmm.
I think you used those words, but and
Mm-hmm.
you described it, and it was. I don't think it was a neutral experience. Like it
No,
was uncomfortable.
it was uncomfortable. Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. No, I thought it was time to leave.
it's amazing that you're laughing now, right? Is that
Yeah,
amazing? Yeah.
totally. I laugh too, because I often tell my own clients, if we stop in the middle of a dark tunnel, you're going to be stuck in the middle of a dark tunnel. Can we, see if we can get to the end? And I
Mm.
was in the middle of the dark tunnel, and I wanted to stop. So I'm really glad that we didn't stop there, for sure. Yeah.
Was the aftermath of that second session also different than the aftermath of the first?
Yes. The first session was very physically focused, and then the second session was more emotionally focused at the end. I don't know if it was a couple of days later, I noticed a very heavy mood come up. I think I just felt very, very low. I think because of being in such a beautiful space. And then, okay, here's life again, right? And I hadn't talked to you yet, which is a big part of the work with you, is the integration afterwards. We hadn't talked yet. I think I was kind of left with, how can I bring this into my life now when I'm just back in the routine and all that kind of stuff. So, but after speaking with you, it helped a lot. Yeah. And you seemed to know exactly what day to call. So I just remember it being right on cue. Oh yeah. Okay, great. Perfect. This timing's great. Mhm.
So, what's interesting to me hearing this is, though we're talking about energy, right? Something that moves and you don't necessarily know what it is. And coming from your background, you have a trust in that it's sometimes not necessary to know the
Mhm.
whatever the details are of
Right.
the stuck energy, the repressed memories, what have you. You just trust that you feel the movement,
Mhm.
and so it's moving. And this is
Yes.
what you anticipate is the moving of
Yes.
something. And yet having, say, yeah, a conversation, the start of having some calls after your session, like you said, was really helpful. But all of that, we're having a phone call. I remember
Mhm.
exactly that
Mhm. Mhm.
one day at it was in the summertime, I believe,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
and here we are talking, where words, cognitive language, here it comes.
Mhm.
What is it about guidance, right? You've come into this guided work, and that's what you do
Mhm.
one on one with clients. How is it that what we could talk about could support the energetic movement
Mhm.
that's there, right? If I'm thinking, I could almost
Yeah.
think, oh, well, maybe the best way to work with that is somatically, for example.
Mhm.
And yet, having some calls afterwards seem to be pretty effective,
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
supportive. How can what do you experience in that kind of guide work?
Yeah. No, a great question. Yeah, because the other work is important, but it really, a big piece of it is the space that you hold for it. I wouldn't go and just being me, go out and do something like this on my own. It just wouldn't have had the same impact. So being in relationship with your presence and your guidance throughout the whole experience, before, during, and after
Hmm.
was a big part of it. And I think that's a really important part of it because the mind gets so involved in figuring this out. And is this right? Is this wrong? What should I be doing? Just to be able to let that go and speak to the experience to somebody who understands, who can offer suggestions, who can offer support. You offer referrals as well if you deem some more work could be done in this area. That's always helpful. Yeah, that's a huge
Hmm.
part of it.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to
Yeah.
ask, is part of the guidance, is it, what is it that has the biggest influence? Is it the framing of
Mm.
things? Is it the
Okay.
action items to follow? Is it the bond, right? The just like our dynamic together. Yeah, what stands out the most in the guidance that is a part of the whole container?
Sure. For me, it was less about giving information, although I think for some people that would be really important as well. It was more about, I guess, the bond is the relationship that we had developed. It's a very vulnerable experience, right? So to be able to feel that kind of safety with somebody is pretty huge. For me, it is anyway. I don't do that with a lot of people. And in fact, I think, and now that you've mentioned, I think that was what I was working with in that second session was the experience of wanting to be more vulnerable. And boy, yeah, it happened.
It, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I often say this is probably one of the most vulnerable experiences a human being will have.
Oh, I think so too. Yeah.
And that we have that intentionally, right? That we say yes to that, that you come back to it. Maybe in your first time it's hard to know just how exposed your psyche is, your
Right.
body is, how unprotected and undefended it is at
Yes.
the peak, let's say, and then to come back into this experience knowing that
Yes.
is to me that alone, the intention to be that vulnerable, trusting that, and trusting all the synchronicities and the setup and everything, of course, it's that alone has its healing
Mm.
potential.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I look back on it sometimes now that we're talking about this, and I'm surprised that I actually was willing to step into that intensity of vulnerability. But I'm really glad I did. Yeah.
Me too. Well,
Yeah.
and this is, when I invited you to have a conversation with me and share that conversation with others, you replied saying that this is some of the most important work that I've done in my life. The last session that we had was in 2024. So a couple of years ago. You're saying this, there's years have passed in between sessions, since sessions, and you can identify that this is important work for you, some of the most important work. How could you sum that up? How and why is it the most important work? I mean, for you, there's so many
Right.
details that we've
Right.
unpacked a little bit here in this conversation, but kind of as
Yeah.
maybe a summary. A summary. How has it been some of the most important work for you?
Well, one piece of it was that it really helped me to feel, again, to come back to safety and trust, kind of the safety and trust that you kind of bring to this session, that, or at least that I felt in presence with you, allowed me to be able to step into an even more vulnerable experience of in ceremony, to let down the defenses that have been in place, and I'm kind of late in life coming to psychedelics, right? So this is my first time, and I'm in my 50s, and I think, well, yeah, better late than never, right? But so the defenses were pretty in place at this stage of my life. So if it gives me the opportunity to let those down and know that I'm going to be okay coming out the other end, that those defenses don't really need to rule the show anymore. Sure, they'll come up every once in a while, but I catch them now and I can kind of breathe into it and welcome them in and say, it's okay, we got this. So that's kind of important.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay. So this has been important work for you in your life. And now, again, years in between sessions, years since the last session. And this isn't easy. Many people, I don't think, have real answer to this question, but I thought, I'd take a stab at it and ask you, um, can you draw any correlation between your sessions and changes that you have come to know, that you've come to implement and employ, maybe actively, and how you enjoy life today? Um, Sometimes it's like, wow, yes, there's been an impact, and there's just ripples and reverberations, and I can't totally name them. And sometimes we can.
Well, I mean, the one that stands out the most for me is coming back to that felt sense experience at the end of my second session. I use that a lot. It's beautiful to meditate in. It's beautiful to just bring to mind whenever I want to bring it to mind and just kind of bask in the glow of that feeling. It's good to bring to mind if I'm going through something challenging and I just need to step away from that and kind of remember who I really am. So that's been a big one. That kind of observer experience is also something I use a lot when I'm going through something, whether it's physical, emotional. This illness I went through last week, I had to cancel our first meeting, and just kind of being with it with love rather than resistance is an offshoot of that work and other things I've done, but that was a big part of it for sure. Yeah, I mean, those are probably a couple of the big things that come to mind.
Those are big things.
Oh, and the other thing, I guess, which is more of a practical thing, I mean, I've been so influenced by my work with you that I have done some training myself on how to support others in their own integration process, not in, the giving of psychedelics, but in their integration, because sometimes they feel pretty unsettled afterwards. Anyway, that's just another more practical. It's influenced me
Great.
so much that now I want to be able to offer support too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. These are big things. These are big impacts. I don't know if it's wishful thinking, but of course, it would be nice for anyone and for me to say, and I think you can relate to this as a therapist, of like, can I take what people have taken away from working in this modality or with me or what have you, and tell somebody at the beginning, this is what you will feel like
Yeah.
years down the road. I,
Yeah.
I can't know that.
Oh no,
So that's
exactly.
why I have these conversations, is to
Yeah.
learn what is the lasting impact on these
Yeah.
sessions. Thank you so much for sharing with me, with others. So the other thing I'd like to ask or talk about is epilepsy.
Yes.
I mean, we can't not talk about it right from the
Hmm.
beginning of having our intake in 2021.
Hmm.
And I'll just broadly paint the picture, but you have what's called juvenile myoclonic
Yes.
seizures.
Yes.
And, when I started this work, a profile like that would certainly be outside of my scope of practice. I would just have a no. And yet, out of curiosity, but also out of a feeling that I think that there's at least a framework here that can be supportive for what you experience, even though I don't know what you will experience. And part of my personal fascination is learning about, obviously, the impact. Does 5-MeO-DMT experiences, do they have an impact on seizures, on epilepsy, but really on a phenomenological level? Like, not everybody can know what a seizure is, thankfully, and it's hard to convey what that is experientially. And so, we talked about it numerous times again over the years, about perhaps the, dare I say, similarities between what's happening when you're inhaling 5-MeO-DMT and what might be happening around the event of a seizure.
Mhm.
I'm curious if you'd be willing to riff on that a little bit with me.
Sure. I don't know if this directly answers your question, but when I had my first experience, which again was very physically focused, what came to mind was the idea of being able to actually observe a seizure. Now, my seizures typically aren't full body seizures, and my full body was involved in that first session, but it's still that same that that image came to mind, or that thought came to mind. Oh, I wonder if this is what a seizure actually kind of looks like. I don't see myself having seizures, right? So that's one thing around this. This came to mind, and again, another piece around epilepsy is I, for many years, have been wanting to get off my medication, and I think I talked to you about that a fair amount. Thing, well, is there anything that can be released that might eventually lead to me getting off my med? In which there's resistance to the seizures when I'm doing that. So kind of a long-term impact of the work that I think we've done is that I now am okay with it, with whatever. I finally got in to see a neurologist after a 3-year wait to talk about getting off my medication. And I realized after meeting with him just a few months ago, I don't really care if this happens or not. It's okay. So I might dabble, that sounds so irresponsible, but I might try out the idea of going off my medication with his support, this neurologist. But I'm not sure yet. So my relationship with my own experience with seizures is impacted. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
It totally does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I guess, basically, does it reduce seizures? Does it have an impact on the condition of being epileptic?
Oh, okay.
Seemingly not. But what you can report, what I'm hearing, is that your attitude towards them and your experience of them in your life has changed. I'm hearing, the word that came to mind was like, you've embraced them even more.
I've embraced the idea that this might need to be in my experience for whatever reason, or it's just in my experience for whatever reason, for whatever amount of time is there. But I am curious still, because since we have had our sessions, there have been times which, after 35 years or so of being on this medication, I sometimes just forget to take it.
Hmm.
And I've gone 2 or 3 days
Hmm.
without taking my medication, just forgetting, which is odd. And I feel I don't feel at all seizure-y. I don't get auras. I don't feel queasy or odd.
Mm.
There was one other time in my life when I consciously went off my medication. I didn't sleep for 5 days
Mm.
just because that's sometimes what happens,
Mm.
but nothing this time. So there's definitely
Mm.
something different, I guess is my point.
Yeah.
And I can certainly get back to you when I go through this little experiment of mine if I do, but
I will be very curious to
yeah.
learn what you learn. Yeah.
One thing I feel pretty confident about though is if it happens that seizures feel different or are not there anymore, that this experience has had an impact. My sessions with 5-MeO definitely have had an impact. Like I just feel that. Can't explain it, but yeah. So but we'll see. See.
You are so brave.
I don't know.
So, I mean, you
I think you
came
were
into
brave taking
this.
me on as a client.
I'll take that. I'll take it. Yeah, I appreciate you so much. It's
Of
always a
course.
delight to see your name on my calendar every now and again for an integration or a consultation call. Thank you for spending some time with me, with
No,
others here who are listening.
it's been a
Yeah.
pleasure for me too, Chad. I think it's wonderful that you're doing these interviews, for want of a better word, I guess, because it's probably really important for people to hear how years down the road people are still experiencing their experiences with 5-MeO. It's not a a one and done kind of experience. So it's really helpful to think to and reflect on it too. How
Yeah.
has this impacted me over the last,
Mm.
5 years
Mm.
since I started? Well, that's really interesting because it can be subtle, it can be obvious, and it can also be really subtle. So, but important still. So thank you.
Yes. You're so welcome. I look forward to more connections over time.
Me too. Me too.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Bye bye.
Bye.